Hey everybody, before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to give a big thank you to my friend Luke Burrows for recommending today's guest. Luke has this awesome podcast called Raising Consciousness, and I highly recommend you check it out. So I'll link to that in the description below for anybody who's interested. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Sunita Passi. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Breakthrough. Today I'm here with Sunita Passi. She is an Ayurvedic practitioner, entrepreneur, author, and educator, and she's joining me here today to discuss all things health and well-being. And I'm very excited to dig into your book. So thanks a lot for joining me. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you.
Thanks for inviting me, Robert. Excited to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
Let's get started just by giving a little bit of background about yourself, because you have a fascinating kind of origin story when it comes to your previous career and your introduction to Ayurvedic practices. So, just for the audience, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this field.
Sure. Yes. So I'm a qualified Ayurvedic practitioner. I've been working with Ayurveda for nearly 2 decades now. So I'm one of the sort of the old school lot, I think. It's quite interesting because Ayurveda seems to be having a renaissance at the moment. So it's going to be good to get into that in this podcast. And I actually started off life as a business journalist. So I used to spend 4 months in a country compiling a business report, and then my company would send me to the next country. Really busy, career and moving around an awful lot, and really burning the candle from both ends. I think that period of my life, I was certainly enjoying life from all those perspectives and everything that comes your way. And I started to feel I was starting to get quite burnt out by a lot of the traveling. And I was actually in Canada on a project in Vancouver, and a colleague of mine said, "You know what, Sunita, you should go and try yoga." So I found this amazing yoga class overlooking the ocean in Vancouver. Um, Hopped along to that class, and I will be honest, Robert, it didn't do anything for me, because now, understanding holistic health, natural health, and also individualized constitutions, it's just anyway, it didn't gel. I didn't touch it again for another couple of years. Then I was on a project in Holland, and there was a yoga class that was taking place, where these guys had gone to India. They trained in hot yoga, and they'd created an experience with incense and chanting. And by this point, I was starting to feel quite frazzled. So I started to go to that class, and that just blew my mind. And that really opened me up to, this incredible world of holistic healing. Didn't take it up professionally at that point. Long story short, a few years later, I actually was in India on a project with my company. And that's really where I got connected to holistic health and Ayurveda. I started to have treatment myself, was experiencing very deep epiphanies and a sense of healing, not just from the professional career, but also from things from the past. And that connection really made me want to understand more, because from a Western perspective, I'd studied biology as, a student, but I'd looked at the body from a muscles and tissues perspective, and the systems that we look at from the Western perspective. And I could feel this was different. This was energy. So that's where it started for me, 2002. And I then took a year off, and I started my training. So I started off really looking at the body work, and that was from a place in Kerala, and training with some traditional doctors there. And that is really what started my journey. So it was quite a 360-degree approach. But it's interesting that it's India that sort of broke me, but also put me back. And I do talk about that in the book.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I
Yeah.
connect to that because I studied journalism in university. I have a bachelor's degree in journalism, and I realized fairly early on that it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue professionally for a bunch of different reasons. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on the state of journalism. What was it about the career that maybe didn't satisfy you fully, that made you look outside for something else? And in what ways do you think that journalism and maybe the media in general are affecting people's health today?
Great question. So prior to actually starting my career as a journalist, I also studied, I did a master's in investigative journalism. So I was really interested in investigation. That's what I thought. I thought my career was going to go in that direction. I was going to make, documentaries that open people's minds up and really truth seeker. I've always been a truth seeker, whether it's health, whether it's journalism, whether it's writing, whatever the medium, I am a truth seeker. So and when I did that MA, studied for that MA, there was one book in particular which was called The Prying Game, that we read, and the author, what's the author's name? Max Brown, I think the author is. And this book really opened my mind to actually the seediness of journalism and all the tools and the techniques that are used in mainstream journalism to get information on people. So we're going back to, this is like 95, 96, I think, So, and I was 24, 25, 26, around about there. So this was very curious for me, and it didn't sit well with my stomach. Some of the things, if you think about technology now, at that time they were already using spying cameras. I remember one part of the book talking about how they'd actually use cameras in people's bins to be able to source information from letters and correspondence. And so, but if I was studying investigative journalism, so this was considered an investigative tool. So I then worked for a local paper, and then started working for this news agency. And what I saw over the years is just the kind of the control of the narrative of information. And I'll give you an example. So I was on a project in Egypt, and when I was writing about business, we were interviewing MDs, high-level CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and we also, in some companies, had the opportunity to also meet with government officials. So in this particular, interview, we were meeting with an official, and everything was sort of, questions have to be sent in advance, and answers are put together, and when you go for that interview, you can't veer off that. So it's not a natural energy exchange as we are, as is taking place here. It's a very controlled environment. So that's one example of something I saw, and I saw many of these examples. And also most publications are they're reliant on the income that actually comes in from the advertisers. That's what keeps the show on the road. It's very, when I was again studying for my MA, we did have a brilliant guy come in who was the publisher of it was like a happy newspaper, and it was publishing positive stories. Now, a few years that magazine didn't continue because that doesn't fuel the financial requirements to keep content published and enough people purchasing it. So it was when you're, and also as a young person, I'm enjoying the lifestyle, so I was paying attention, but I wasn't paying attention, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It was there, and I could get a sense of what this industry was about. But I guess as we evolve as people and humans, also we're also evolving our sense of where we put our energy and our sense of value in the world as well. And that started to get stronger and stronger for me, to a point where I just thought, actually, this isn't the calling for me. My gifts and skills can be utilized in a better way, where I feel I'm serving people and really supporting them in their sense of awareness and growing in consciousness. So it was an interesting journey, yeah. And I interviewed so many people. Even when I came back to UK, I worked for another publication. Now that actually was pure content. That didn't rely on advertising. And intellectually, I really enjoyed working for that publication. It was again in business, and it was in the IT industry, the European IT industry. But they really struggle financially. Like every month, we knew that budgets were tight. So you've got this conflict going on. How do you maintain quality, a quality publication, but also have the capacity to distribute it fully, against publishing something of a true narrative, but the budgets aren't there. That was it. The penny dropped.
It's a tricky balancing
Yeah.
act, I imagine.
Yeah.
We hear so much today about mental health struggles and issues. It's a widespread thing at this point, and I can't help but feel that whether it's traditional mainstream media or social media is a contributing factor to that in a big way. And it has something to do with what you mentioned about how negativity sells better than positivity. There's a saying, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
So how do you think this is affecting people on a large scale, and what kind of a direction are we moving in? Are people realizing this? Are things getting better, or is the trajectory kind of like staying the same?
I feel there's different levels to this. So the awareness is there because again we're seeing lots of content and lots of journalists and many publications writing about the impact of social media, the positives and the negatives. So from the positive perspectives, obviously things like Zoom, really took off during lockdown, and it's incredible we can be sitting here now having this conversation. Um, Information has been able to be dispersed on a level never before. Creatively, you can access content and data in ways that you couldn't before. It was, which may also be hard for artists in a sense, because artists would be the ones who would go out there and with their creativity actually look for nuances, whereas actually now we have all of that information readily available through the press of a button. And also sort of access to communication. So I was very sort of anti all of the apps and social media, and I was the last person to have my emails connected to my phone. I really was. But there was a project I was working on and I had to be more reactive. So in the end, I succumbed, and now I can see the benefit of it as long as you have boundaries. So that's where I can see that access to technology and also social media is very beneficial. Also for small businesses, I'm an SME, and we're able to create marketing content and actually reach out to new audiences in a way that wouldn't have been possible before. And also the new AI tools are enabling that even more so. So we're going to see a lot of shift there. I had a meeting with a colleague who is building a platform in India, actually connecting Ayurvedic healthcare practitioners. He was in London a few weeks ago, and we were sitting down talking about this. And, he said it's incredible because actually new technology has enabled micro business owners in villages, in certain places in India, actually build a business. So that's where I can see huge change taking place on a professional level, socially. Where it's a real problem and a crisis, I would say, is the growth of the growth and the intensity of actually pushing content onto people. So there's an addiction. And we can see that with our kids. We can see the level of scrolling and actually how it's quite difficult to set boundaries there. We can see how it's another marketing platform for companies with big budgets, where again it's constantly creating desire. So you're not just it's very difficult to plug out of this unless you have very strong boundaries, or you're very aware that actually that algorithm is chasing you. They're picking up on what you're saying, what you're watching, and you're being fed information specifically to spend and purchase again. So it's all consuming. And we've also got the growth of things like influencers, which again I think certain influencers, micro influencers for instance, who are ethical and authentic to their craft and cause, are a good platform to actually share information to their audience of things that are going to be of value and of interest. Now, again, where it becomes an issue is where it's a pure marketing platform, and you're just being again sold things that you don't need. So this is being felt by individuals, but also by families. And it's I think what's happened is that we know this, people know sort of they can see what's going on. But I do believe there's also a laziness, because you've got to have energy to actually kind of strengthen your energy system so that you can have strong boundaries around what comes your way, and also decide to the extent that you want to interact with all of the information. Traditional advertising maybe was a bit simpler, because we'd see billboards, and we'd have there might be an advertisement on television in between a couple of programs that you really like. So in a way, it was less invasive. Now it's a lot more invasive, and it's definitely impacting mental health, and it's but this is also bringing people now. I think people are also at the place where they also have to also sort of trust in their own judgment, and actually consider, how do I want to live my life? Is this a sense of quality for me? Do I want to be consumed by all of this information? If there's a sense of, if I plug out, what happens? Am I missing out? Am I not going to get information? And only you can answer that, really, at the end of the day. But what I hope is that people do start to plug out, and they get connected to nature more so. And, we go back to some of the things that a sense of camaraderie and community, where, that energy exchange between us in a live setting actually provides us with this kick that we're getting from absorbing social media. So that was a bit of a long answer.
It was a great answer. I think it comes down to, largely speaking, awareness of how you're using it and how it's affecting you, and so that you can make proper decisions on how to adjust and if there's better ways to go about it. I'd like to get further into some of the ways that technology can enhance Ayurvedic practices. But maybe before we get there, if you could just give for the audience an overview of what is Ayurveda exactly, because we haven't touched on that yet.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Ayurveda is a traditional Indian healing system, and it's the evolution of it started around 5,000 years ago. It actually started to get documented about 700 BC. And it was traditional Vaidyas, so traditional health care practitioners that were based around India, who wanted to share information of holistic health. So they collectively started to work together to actually start to document the information. And as a health system, it's 360-degree approach. So it's where we're focused on mind, body, and spirit. There's a huge spiritual component to Ayurvedic medicine. And in a nutshell, I look at it as 6 specific areas when we're looking at preventative health. So first thing is nutrition, and from the Ayurvedic perspective, it's an individualized health system. So you have an individual dosha, which is a body type, and your nutrition. It's not just the foods that you eat; it's also the quality of the foods, it's how you eat, when you eat, the space that you eat in. Many other attributes in the sense of having a sense of well-being when it comes to your nutrition. We then have herbal remedies. So there's many wonderful powders, herbs, tablets that can help you with everyday ailments. Yoga and meditation, tantra, all these energy tools are also part of Ayurveda and a system within themselves. Ayurvedic bodywork, which is an area I specialize in. So that's working on energy points on the body, moving energy, any stuck energy within the body to really create more life force, more vitality. We also have spiritual practices. So there are rituals within Ayurveda that you can practice that will also enhance your energy systems. And then we have something called panchakarma. And panchakarma is the classical way to detox the body. So traditionally, those enthusiasts in Ayurveda would once a year would go and have, panchakarma treatment, which traditionally would last a minimum of 21 days. But in a nutshell, that's just a great way to detox and cleanse your body. Anyone can go and have a cleansing treatment, in the same way that in the Western world now, more of us are going for retreats. We're understanding the benefit of taking ourselves off for 3, 5+ days to actually spend time with ourselves in nature, eat good food, engage in some sort of energy practices, and actually detox from our busy lives around us. And what you find with Ayurveda is that it's preventative health. That's where it really comes to life. So having the tools, the techniques to really live a good, balanced life, and having a toolbox. So when things do get a bit funky, or you don't feel, completely yourself, you've actually got a really full toolbox that you can apply.
So very different from Western medicine in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
where, as you mentioned, it's about preventative health, whereas in the West, we, go to see a doctor when something is wrong with us. But, other than that, it's kind of in our own hands to take care of ourselves so that we live a healthy lifestyle. And it's not always easy with the way that many of us tend to live in the West. The title of your book is The Doctor Won't See You Now, Staying Healthy While the Medical System is Rebooted. And I'm curious about that title, particularly the part about the medical system being rebooted. Can you elaborate on that?
I can, yes. So I always thought my first book was going to be specifically for therapists and practitioners, because I've been teaching therapists and practitioners for nearly 20 years. So I always thought that would be my first book. But when everything kicked off with COVID-19 and the pandemic, it became clear to me that our healthcare system needs healing itself. And during that time, I was surrounded by people those that had knowledge, because I have lots of colleagues and friends who are therapists, practitioners, or have an interest in alternative health, so already had a big toolbox. But also, I saw that a lot of people were nervous to take responsibility for their own well-being, and it was a time where a lot of information was being, pushed at us all. And it was very difficult to sit in your own judgment as to how you would manage your health. That was really the biggest thing I saw. And I thought, well, I have all of this knowledge that can help a layperson. So actually, this is the time to finish this book, and it should be for anyone who really wants to get there, have those tools. We had to decide to what extent we were going to wear masks, or we had to decide, how to the level that we would stay away from our elderly relatives. And then we had to also take the important issue as to how we would seek treatment. So there was so much going on. And I'm sitting here knowing that there's a million and one things that you can do, to support your immunity and to support your health. So that's where the title came from. That also, it was a time where the doors were shut. We couldn't really easily access medical, our doctors, our nurses, certainly in the UK. Don't know what it was like in America, Robert, but, I'd be excited. Yeah. And information overload. And so I just felt that it was a time where also more and more people were kind of waking up to their own sense of well-being and wellness, and starting to think, what are some of the things that I can do for myself, and what are the things that I can also highlight for my family. And a lot of this moved towards holistic health, and Ayurveda is a purely holistic health system. So, and what we're seeing in the UK now is there is a big shift taking place. So, I'm all in favour of the NHS. It's an incredible health system. We're so lucky to have it. I know in America you've got a very different system, and so we are blessed to have this health system. But it's sort of it also needs a reshift and a reboot, and it's also is a lot of people rely on the NHS unnecessarily. So there are many things we can be doing ourselves, again going back to prevention rather than cure, where if we don't sit in fear, if we actually sit with ourselves and we start to kind of we relearn some of these tools and these techniques and understand some basic practices, we can use personalized treatment, self-care to enhance our health, rather than feel, okay, I've got to pick that phone up and I've got to go and I need to go and have an appointment. And what you're doing there is you're actually sort of handing your sense of authority over to somebody else. And our Western doctors, we've got a growing community that are starting to learn more themselves, because it's not part of their 7-year training. And they're starting to understand more about tools and techniques within holistic health systems. And it's not just Ayurveda, there's Chinese medicine as well. But the system itself doesn't enable them to impart that knowledge when you go and have that session. So they may be sitting there thinking, actually, you could try this, but the system that they're trained in is requiring them to give the advice that they give. And I'm not saying that Western medicine doesn't have its place. It absolutely does, and we've got plenty of examples in my family where, again, I feel very blessed that we could tap into those services. But there's a lot of things that you can consider yourself, with regards to your own unique constitution. So that's where it really, I think, that the big differentiation is.
What's your recommendation for people who are ready to take more responsibility for their health, but might seem intimidated or overwhelmed by all of the information that's out there? What would be a good entry point for them? You mentioned that yoga may have opened the door for you at one point in your career, and kind of opened your mind up to embracing the rest of these Ayurvedic practices. But what's the ideal entry point in your mind for somebody who's completely new to this?
Well, I'm going to start with my book, actually, because I wrote it with that exact audience in my mind. I thought, if I was starting this path again, and I had the privilege of traveling all over the world, so I'm being absorbed with lots of new information and different types of thinking and therapists and practitioners now. That's not everybody's journey, everybody's story. So actually, in my book, each chapter has certain questions which you can ask yourself, and you can journal on them, and that will give you a lot of information. Because it may be that yoga isn't your thing. It's not everybody's thing. It may be Tai Chi. You might prefer Tai Chi, and that opens you up to a world of energy, and you can feel the shift and feel more peace and calm in yourself. So I never like to just push certain tools on people, because we are also, unique in what resonates with us. But by starting to actually kind of, think about the concepts that you kind of live and breathe by, and this is my sort of investigative nature that comes in, is that actually just look at them and actually question them. Think, where have you received that information from? What's maybe blocking you from trying something else? Because actually, once you start to grow in awareness and open your mind up to other possibilities, quite quickly you can start to move and shift, and you'll it's incredible what happens, because it's almost like a manifestation, Robert, which I know in America is a big topic and big conversation. But I do believe once your energy starts to shift, the right information starts to come towards you. All of a sudden you'll be walking in a bookshop and you'll see a book and it just completely resonates, and actually that's the one that you need to read there and then. There are many books on alternative health systems, but actually it's reading something from a theoretical perspective to actually embodying it on a practical perspective are two completely different things. So that would be my advice. If you're not a big reader, then there are also really good, I think YouTube has so much good content now. There's lots of great therapists and practitioners. And if yoga is your thing, you can actually Google something like yoga for beginners, and get a sense of the teachers that are on there, see who resonates with you, and actually just start to follow their content. And that's something else that's really valuable, because again, it's something I found in my own life, that sort of there's teachers that come into your life for a period of time, and you can learn from them. They're just a few steps ahead. That's all it is. They're a few steps ahead. They've got something to share. They've experienced something. They want to share it. And as you go through that content, you'll grow in awareness. You'll grow in confidence in maybe trying some new disciplines, and it may be then you move on to another teacher, and so the journey continues. How about yourself, Robert? How have you sort of moved in this realm? What are some of the things that work for you?
That's a good question. I've never been asked that before. I think that through my career in digital media, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of time to consume information from different sources. So lots of time listening to different podcasts and interviews and videos, which have led me down various rabbit holes. And it's very much like you said, I think, energy takes you in certain directions and you gravitate towards certain things. So much like seeing a book on a shelf, it was very similar for me with watching a video on YouTube that really struck a chord with me. And then I wanted to learn more and more. And I got down this path to the point where now I would like to talk to these people myself, which is why I'm speaking with you here
Mm-hmm.
today. So that's the whole basis for my show, is just speaking to people with different viewpoints on how to live your best life and get the most out of the time that we have here, really.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And that's you've picked up on podcasts. That's just an easy and accessible way to consume new ideas and content. And I think anyone listening to your podcast that's exactly the journey they're taken on, is that you're really opening people's minds with the interviews that you're having. So there we go. There's another point. Yeah.
Well, I would hope that's the case. That,
Excellent.
that that would
Yes.
make me
Yeah.
very happy. I think it
Yeah.
also speaks to the one of the positive sides of technology, because I have the tendency to vilify it a little bit, even though it's like the basis for my entire career and this podcast and everything. But we have a tendency sometimes to look at the dark side of things. And I just wanted to highlight what you said before about all of the videos that we have access to and all of the information that's out there to introduce you to these concepts about holistic health and much more. And it's interesting because Ayurveda is an ancient practice, but we're employing these practices in a modern context where we have the access to the internet and all these technologies, and AI coming up, which will change things even further. How do you think technology is serving to enhance Ayurveda, if at all, in your opinion?
Yes. So this year alone, I this was a question I asked myself. So this year alone, I've actually done quite a lot of training, Robert. I went on a 3-month digital marketing course to really get my head around all of the new things that are very not far away at all. They're coming around really quickly. I was also very lucky to also go on an immersive technology program with Nottingham Trent University, which I only finished a few weeks ago, which was blew my mind, absolutely incredible. And this is technology that up until now has only been utilized in big Hollywood movies and very, very, very expensive technology, because it takes so long, as you would know, it takes so long to just put 3 minutes together. The level of editing that's required, the technology infrastructure is not so stable yet, so it's so kind of the experts are learning as they go along as well. And I think also with AI tools, there's so many new AI tools that are coming up. There's a lot of creation taking place around that. That we are, that there's going to be there's going to be a lot of option. So from the Ayurvedic perspective, there's different. We can look at it from different perspectives. If you're a practitioner, and you're working with clients one to one, then it can be very useful in the sense of managing your administration. Excuse me, because there's all sorts of tools now that will make your job easier. Whereas before you might have needed to, have an admin assistant, or have very expensive software to to support maybe the note making that you're keeping for each client or patient, depending on whether you're working with clients or patients. And also from a marketing perspective, if you're a practitioner, there's so many tools. So some of the simple ones, obviously ChatGPT is really helping people with their content. You've got Designer with a double R, which is really useful if you want to put some ebooks together. You've got, we learned we went through so many different tools. So if let's say you're running a clinic or a practice, then definitely these tools are going to be helpful for that perspective. If you're an individual tapping into Ayurveda, what's happening there? I mean, for instance, this platform that is been developed in India. So this platform that has been developed in India is, I'm just trying to remember the name of it because it's really worth checking out. But it's up until now, Ayurveda in India is considered a healthcare system, whereas actually in America and the UK, it's an alternative health system, which is lesser known. But in India, it's a bona fide healthcare system. People either go to see a Western doctor, or they go to see their Ayurvedic doctor, or they have a combination. Many have a combination, and also the information is passed on down. But all of the majority of Ayurvedic practitioners and doctors were working individually, so they're micro entrepreneurs, and this platform is now connecting them all. So it's a support system to actually give them the infrastructure for them to deliver their services, while the platform takes care of the back end, side of things. So it's there's a harmony that's being created, and this will enable a healthier society because they'll be able to reach more people. Through the platform, they're running workshops and educational programs, and they're able to share that content, throughout the country. So in that way, that's fantastic because they're educating and advocating for this ancient science, but they're using modern technology to actually spread the information. I also think, having just completed this immersive technology course, I also think it's a really interesting way to also create very interesting content. So, because there's a lot of content out there now, and if you are a content producer, it can feel quite overwhelming, and depending on the who you're speaking to, it may feel competitive. And I can see with immersive technology, it's going to be a new way to actually deliver your message, but in a really interesting capacity. It's bringing more creation. It's basically bringing more creation into that delivery and into that message, and hopefully making that experience then for the user more interesting and more dynamic. And if something's more interesting and more dynamic, you're much more likely to pay attention and try and give it a go. And hopefully that then opens your mind to then thinking, okay, now I'm going to listen to the podcast. Now I'm going to read the book, because this sounds really, cool and interesting. So I think as long as we look at it, as long as, there was Dr. What's his name? There's a Dr. Joe Dispenza. I saw a podcast of his recently. And I really like what he said, because he was asked a similar question, and he said, I'm all for it as long as it's got the same mission. And I would say the same thing. As long as we're utilizing the technology in service, then it's an absolutely, wonderful, process to go through. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. And I love Joe
Yeah.
Dispenza. I listen to him all the time, and he's got great messages to share. I find something fascinating about the concept of using new and emerging technology to deliver this ancient wisdom to people. It's kind of like a 360-degree thing that I find so amazing. It's yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
what it is about it. It's just like this information is true throughout all of time, and we just have to find different ways to expose people to it as society changes, I guess.
Yeah. How do you see it? Because you're that this is your field. So how do you see it from your perspective?
How do I see what exactly?
How do you see the dissemination of it? Maybe there's other things that you can see that I haven't tapped into yet.
Well, I think that it's increasingly easy once you start to show interest in something. The
Mm.
algorithms that we deal with when we're online will feed you more of what you are looking for. So if you have an interest in these things, then it will become much easier over time. The more you look, the more you will find. For somebody
Mm.
who isn't interested, they may never come across it because they're just getting more of what they're looking for. So my hope is that by just speaking to more people, that I may introduce a concept that they become interested in, and then it's basically a rabbit hole that you can go down. Once the floodgates open, then all of the information is available to you, but you need to have that little spark of interest to start out. So I think that's the most important part of it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that guides you. That then guides you. It's and yeah, it's limitless then because there is so much information. We could all again if we go back to the few years that we were going through the pandemic, we all had access to the same information, but yet we were all gaining information in different ways and carrying so much different information as well. You could be in the same household. So many people saw they could be in the same household and be carrying very different information to the person next to them. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's all good, and again, it's as long as we're using it in that really great capacity, then it's all positive.
I'm curious to know
Yeah.
why you think it hasn't caught on stronger in the West. It is still regarded, as you said, as an alternative medicine. And
Mm.
to me, the benefits seem numerous. And, the Western pharmaceutical based medical system, uh, as many benefits as it has, we all hear about the, more troubling sides of it and how it's very profit driven and it's a business and everything. So why do you think that things have Ayurvedic practices or any more or holistic healing practices haven't caught on more in the Western world?
So there's a few different tiers to this. So if we go back 200 years ago, what we're calling alternative health was the norm. We would have all been working with natural herbs from the environment around us. We would have all taken certain lotions and potions, that are formulas that are passed down from our ancestors and that we know that they work. And also, our lives were a lot more simpler. But we also had knowledge of herbs and cooking ingredients and the ingredients that actually support our health. So things that support a cough, things that support indigestion. If you look at Indian food, there's certain ingredients that we cook with, but we know it's good for our health. So things like turmeric, which is great for digestion, ginger, garlic, these are all very cleansing ingredients and brilliant for health. So this knowledge was naturally known. You didn't have to go off and learn it. And it was widely accepted as well. And also even if we go back further, tools like meditation and yoga, were natural practices that people would integrate into their life. You haven't got to be some spiritual teacher sitting on a mountain in Rishikesh in India to practice any of these things. They were very much part of society, and we understood the benefit of them. But as sort of the West developed, a few things happened, which the there was we've got sort of the medical system was financed by we had the Rockefellers, we had other people involved in that finance. And so when you have a lot of investment in one particular system, you're able to roll it out, on a level that was unsustainable to natural alternative health, because this was something that was passed on through the wisdom seekers, and making sure that the information got into people's hands. So then you've got, it's kind of like, then that message gets dissipated while this other message gets louder and louder and louder. And then also, a lot of investment was put behind actually training Western doctors with a certain training program, not integrative. So in a nutshell, we've lived with that system in the West for a few hundred years now, and that means that the information of alternative health, traditional health, we have to shout louder, and there isn't necessarily we can't make the same impact, because we don't have those resources behind that messaging. So often what happens is people go to alternative health systems when they've gone through the Western system, and maybe it hasn't worked for them. That's what you'll often find. That's what I've seen with my own clients over the years. So it tends to be a last resort rather than a first resort. It's only a first resort if you have that awareness and you're already, living, that kind of lifestyle. So by that point, you're then playing catch up. And so that's quite significant. So I think that's quite significant. The other reason is also in the West, Ayurveda is seen, it's more philosophical. So when I studied with the College of Ayurveda, which is the main training school in Ayurveda in Europe, I believe, and it was very small groups. So every year now, Chinese medicine has more students. Chinese medicine has, I think a few hundred, students study Chinese medicine every year, let's say in UK colleges, and there's more than one. But with Ayurveda, it was very small numbers. We've maybe got 10 or 12 practitioners that are new practitioners that are being qualified every year. So it's a minute number. It's greater in America. So I think, there you have more schools and you do have more practitioners studying. And many of them, when I look back at when I studied, I think in our class, it's probably 3 of us that actually have gone out professionally, with the information. The other students, it was wonderful being in this group, but they were definitely there from a more philosophical perspective, and because it is very philosophical. In the first year, you're learning Sanskrit, which is the ancient language of India, and because that's also the bedrock of a lot of the modules that we then continue, go on to study. So I think we need more professionals actually sharing the information, and we need more structured strategies to be able to disseminate the information. And even the books that are being written, there's many kind of magazine type books on Ayurveda, which are great to put on your coffee table, and you can certainly do your Ayurvedic dosha quiz. So there's plenty of that, but there's not so much, books like, the book I've written. We've got a number of teachers that have imparted a lot of knowledge. But they're also near retirement now. So, I'm not so sure how many more books they'll be putting out. So it really is a sense of content, and actually how we disseminate it and how we reach more people. And can we reach them, before illness strikes? Can we reach people in that state of consciousness where actually they're starting to explore complementary medicine, and Ayurveda is something that they're starting to explore? That's what we really, want to see more of. So that's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think has happened.
So leading off of that, what is your view of the future of Western medicine? Do you think that it will become more of an integrative thing where you will have various options moving forward? will Ayurveda and other similar practices kind of like be elevated to the level of mainstream medicine in the West?
Yeah, so I that's what I hope. That
Mhm.
would be my greatest hope is that as we move forward, medicine is integrative. I think in America, you're probably a few steps ahead of us because you pay for your healthcare. So when you're paying for your healthcare, you want to have choice. And so in that way, I my feeling is I spent a bit of time in America, but not enough to really get my head around this. But I feel that in America there are, there is more choice in that way. In the West, because most people will rely on the NHS first, Ayurveda is not integrated into the NHS, so they wouldn't get that message or that information in that way. So that's the mass. So they would need to already be thinking more openly and looking at holistic health approaches outside of, speaking to their doctor. As we move forward, I do believe where things are changing and shifting. There's lots of good stuff happening in the UK. There are, we've got three good training schools now, that are really committed to educating more practitioners. And I feel, the next stage is to also assist those practitioners in being able to run a clinic, because once they've trained, they can be training between, up to, 4 years. And because they don't have a place in the NHS, which is, a doctor will train for 7 years and then they know they can go and work in the NHS and immediately they've got a wage. Now, that's not the case if you choose to, walk a path as an alternative healthcare practitioner. You've got to decide, how am I going to do it? You've got to also understand marketing. You are your own entrepreneur. So you're signing up for something very different, and not everybody has that skill set. So what I'd also like to see is these adjustments in how we support the practitioners coming through actually get started. How do we make sure that they have a place to practice and they can make a living from this, and a good living? And that that we can see the ripple effects of having more alternative healthcare practitioners, Ayurveda practitioners, Chinese medicine practitioners. There are other systems, and how we can showcase these health systems and give clients and patients alternatives. So, you have the choice. If you need to go and seek professional help, actually there are other choices, but you need to know that those choices are available. So we need to create better systems really to make that happen.
That's a great point. I'm actually based in Canada, so we have free healthcare here.
Yeah,
But I have found, I think this is more or less when my wife and I had our first child, we started to explore these alternatives as well. So starting to see naturopaths and stuff like this, consulting with different people outside of, well, I'm calling it traditional, our what we regard as traditional in the West medical system. But once you start to explore that, you realize that there are really good options out there too. So I think it's just a question of, having a bit of curiosity and exploring a little bit. You also brought up a
yeah,
great point about how it's difficult for people to walk that path compared to, other like the NHS, for example, becoming a doctor. Uh, I think that ensures that the people who are practicing Ayurveda are passionate and dedicated because they wouldn't be able to get there if they weren't, right? Because there are obstacles in the way. Is that
yeah.
right?
Many. You're 100% right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I see it with my own students. So I train therapists in our academy, and I would say, I was asked recently, how many of them actually go on and build their own practice, and it's not more than 20%. So 80% come, they train, and then there's too many obstacles for them, to be able to get their practice up and running. So so you're absolutely right. So it's a different headspace. And you reminded me now of actually something very interesting experience I had, which was a number of years ago. But I was invited to give a couple of lectures to third year medical students at a university not in the UK. In sort of in the Midlands, and I was really nervous. I remember when I was scheduled to, I was really nervous driving up, and my own sense of maybe self-awareness or a slight lack there, thinking I'm going to be standing in front of these third year medical students, and maybe they'll have more knowledge than me, and what have I got to share with them? What was really interesting was, as soon as I stood in front of them, that fear went, and I was able to kind of adjust myself, and I stood there really confidently, and they really enjoyed the content. That was what was really interesting. And there were 70 students, and I asked them all. I said, first of all, how many of you practice? I thought I'd start a bit easy. How many of you practice meditation or are familiar with meditation? And I think we got a couple of hands for that. Then I said, how many of you are familiar with yoga or practice yoga? And I think it was one hand. And then, I said, well, I'm here to tell you about Ayurveda as a health system. How many of you are familiar with Ayurveda? And I got a half hand, not even a full hand.
Not very confident.
And, and I was like, this is going to be really interesting. And so, completed the talk that I was there to give. And then at the end, it was open to question and answer. And I said, if they could have, I thought, you can ask me anything. You can ask me about herbs for diabetes, or, what would I recommend if somebody had arthritis, or if their body was inflamed, and actually it was really interesting because I got one question. And the question was, if I was to choose to practice this as opposed to training as a Western medical doctor, what can I expect to earn? So it was really interesting. So I took a deep breath and I thought, well, this is my opportunity to really, promote Ayurveda as a system, as a medical professional. Where you can help your patients. So I took a deep breath, and I really thought about my answer, and but because we are so bound by having to build our own businesses and practices, either you can go and work in a clinic where somebody's already established a practice, or you set up your own clinic. Many practitioners will start off with a home clinic because they don't want to take on the extra cost of having leases and rent. And then if you do have the finances and the budget, then yes, you can go out and create something quite sizable. But they're basically your three options. And I could see, him like nodding his head because a Western doctor does not have to go out and market their services at all. So we have to do that as alternative healthcare practitioners. We have to have that skill set, and we also have to invest in it. But I learned a lot that day, Robert. I really did. And I realized how important it is to make sure we can clearly show a viable financial path for our therapists and practitioners. And also you touched on something really important about how, because there are so many hoops to jump over, that actually, if you're going to do it, it's coming from a really real place. So that is the biggest difference that I just felt that when I was sitting there with those amazing, they were the future of our, medical professionals in the UK, 70 of them in a room. It felt really powerful. The energy felt really powerful. And I thought, if I can inspire even one of them, even with one of the tools, they're going to see thousands of patients, throughout their career. Then, and they feel confident enough to pass that on as a message, then actually I've done my job. It was worth the drive up here. But also I felt that, I was also sitting in a room where that career choice was a lifestyle choice, as opposed to, an alternative healthcare practitioner who's basically gone on a journey and they've discovered something really powerful. that they know is transformative. And so actually, when you're putting this out into the world, it's literally coming from something deep within you that you've got to get it into as many people's hands as possible. So it's yeah, it's they're both good. Just it's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great story, and it really highlights the differences very well. Listen,
Mm.
Sunita, I feel like I could speak about this for hours more, but we're almost out of time. But I know that you have a business called Tridosha. Would you like to share a little bit about that and any other business projects that you have going on?
Yeah, so I mean, I am an entrepreneur alongside, my Ayurveda practice. So I have a practice. I do see clients one to one, and I also have a training academy which I founded in 2005. So we train therapists and practitioners in accredited qualifications. So this is hands-on body work. And the certifications were accredited with the Federation of Holistic Therapists. So that certification you can take anywhere in the world if you want to practice. And then I'm also a skincare entrepreneur. So we formulate. We actually work with a farm in Tamil Nadu in southern India. So we do a lot of research on the medicinal herbs, and we formulate a skincare and body care products. We've got 20 products within the Tridosha brand. And on that side, we do also work with salons, we work with spas, and we work with independent therapists. So there's different things going on there. But have a look at our website, and you'll see everything that we do. And my own website, my own clinic practice is under my own name, sunitapassi.com.
Great. I will include links to all of those in the description for the video. So anybody who's interested, please check that out, as well as a link to your book, which I believe is available on Amazon.
It is.
Highly recommended. I really enjoyed it. It's funny, it's informative, it's a great read. It's also not super long, so like it's something that you can enjoy in a weekend. Called "The Doctor Won't See You Now: Staying Healthy While the Medical System is Rebooted." Please check it out. I'm going to include a link to that in the description. Sunita, thank you so much. It was great speaking to you. So much information. I could just go on and on about this. We may have to do it again sometime, but I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Pleasure.